There was a week this month. You know the one. When everything about you felt wrong. Your face, your voice, your thoughts. You looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize yourself. Not just physically, but energetically. Something about your own presence felt foreign, heavy, unlikable. You hated the way your clothes fit. You hated how loud you were. You hated how quiet you were. You hated that you needed too much. You hated that you pulled away. You hated you. And you didn't tell anyone. Because how do you explain that the most unbearable part of your month was simply existing in your own skin? This wasn't a crisis. This was your routine. Every few weeks, like clockwork, you quietly stopped liking yourself. You softened your voice. You edited your personality. You apologized more. You tried to take up less space. Because something in you convinced you that you were a burden. That your presence was too much. That your laughter was annoying. That your body was wrong. That your needs were embarrassing. And you believed it. Again. But here's what no one told you. That wasn't really you. That was your cycle. In disguise. That was your hormones. Wearing your voice. And dragging your worth through the dirt. That was your progesterone crash. Whispering lies in a tone that sounded like truth. And you listened. Because the voice felt internal. Familiar. Real. But it wasn't. It was chemical. It was structural. It was survival mode. Masquerading as self-awareness. And you had no idea. No one ever taught you. That estrogen plays a key role in confidence. That serotonin, your mood stabilizer, drops too. That your brain actually becomes more sensitive to social rejection right before your period. So when you started feeling like no one liked you, it wasn't your intuition. It was your neurobiology. And when you started thinking you were a failure, it wasn't your truth. It was your neurotransmitters malfunctioning under hormonal strain. This matters. Because when you don't know what's happening, you internalize it. You think it's your fault. You think it's your real opinion of yourself. You think it's evidence that this self-love was fake all along. But the truth is, you didn't suddenly become unworthy. You became chemically vulnerable. And that's not your identity. That's your cycle's shadow. It shows up the same way every time. And every time, you forget it's coming. Because hormonal amnesia is part of the pattern. Your brain can't hold on to the brightness when it's dipped in darkness. So, it forgets how good you felt last week. It forgets how many people love you. It forgets how far you've come. And it replaces that memory with a cruel mirage. One where you are unlovable, unfixable, alone. That is not your truth. That is the storm. And just like all storms, it passes. But you need to remember this. You are not broken. You are cycling. And when the voice inside you gets cruel, you don't need to obey it. You need to outlast it. You need to say, this voice is not my truth. It's my hormones in a costume. And you wait. You don't quit. You don't ghost. You don't cut your hair. You don't delete the thing. You wait. Because the version of you who thinks she's worthless is not qualified to make permanent decisions. She's just passing through. And if you can hold her with patience, not panic, you'll notice something miraculous. She leaves. And you return. Not the broken version, but the real one. The one who feels joy. The one who moves freely. The one who smiles without rehearsing. You come back. Every single time. You come back. Every single time. But by then, some damage has already been done. Because even if the storm passes, it leaves behind debris. A little less trust in yourself. A little more doubt in your progress. A faint echo of the lie. Maybe that voice was right. That's how this cycle works. Not just hormonally, but emotionally. You build yourself up all month, only to be dismantled by a voice you didn't invite. And even when the real you returns, she's forced to pick up the pieces of what the shadow you destroyed. This is not just unfair. It's traumatic. It's emotional whiplash, on repeat. And because no one talks about it, you assume it's just you. You assume other women have it all figured out, that they don't crumble every 28 days, that they don't question their entire identity before their period. But they do. They just hide it like you do. And that silence makes the cycle stronger. Because shame thrives in secrecy. And when you don't talk about it, you don't track it. And when you don't track it, you can't prove it's a pattern. So every month, it feels new, random, personal, but it's not. This is the invisible rhythm behind so much female suffering. This is the whispered reason why women ghost their friends, cancel their plans, feel suddenly unworthy of love. It's the silent saboteur of self-worth and relationships. And it deserves a name. So let's name it. The pre-self-hate phase. It's real, it's measurable, and it's not your fault. It's a hormonal hallucination with emotional consequences. And now that you know, you can begin to prepare, not to fix yourself, but to hold yourself, not to avoid the storm, but to build a shelter for when it hits. That shelter is awareness. That shelter is tracking. That shelter is knowing that what you feel is not always what's true. So next time you start to spiral, you stop. You open your calendar. You check the date. You ask, where am I in my cycle? And if the answer is 3 days before my period, you say, this isn't me. This is chemistry. You don't argue with the thoughts. You don't try to logic your way out. You just observe. You label. You breathe. Because naming it reduces its power, and tracking it restores your agency. This is how you reclaim your self-trust, not by being perfectly stable, but by being deeply aware, by knowing your rhythms better than they know you. So the next time that hateful voice returns, you'll greet her like a visitor. Hello, old friend. I see you've arrived again. I won't believe you, but I'll let you pass through. And she will. Because she always does. She's not your enemy. She's your warning sign. She lets you know that your hormones are shifting, that your body is recalibrating, that your mind needs gentleness, not judgment. You don't need to fight her. You just need to witness her. And then, without panic, without shame, you let her go. Because the real you is waiting on the other side of the wave. Still whole, still worthy, still here. Imagine if you started treating your cycle like a language, not a problem. Each phase, a different dialect of your body's truth. Not chaos, not weakness, but communication. Your highs aren't lies. Your lows aren't failures. They're signals. And if you listen, really listen, you'll notice a rhythm beneath the noise. Ovulation brings clarity. Luteal phases bring honesty. Menstruation brings release. Follicular phases bring rebirth. Each part of you has a message. The problem is, you were taught to ignore them. Taught to be consistent, to be rational, to be always on. But your body isn't a machine. It's a moon. It waxes. It wanes. It disappears. It returns. And in that movement, there's intelligence. But we're afraid of that intelligence. Because it isn't linear. It isn't tidy. It doesn't always show up on time or with grace. So we label it unstable. We call it irrational. We dismiss it as emotional. But here's what they don't tell you. Emotion is data. Mood is feedback. And fluctuations are wisdom. So when your self-worth dips, right before your period, it's not an error. It's a flare, a signal that your system is inflamed, overloaded, demanding rest. But because you live in a culture that rewards productivity and punishes softness, you don't rest. You push. You ignore the whisper until it becomes a scream. And that scream sounds like, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Everyone's better than me. But it's not truth. It's a cry for care. So what if, instead of believing the voice, you responded to the need? What if, in your darkest mental days, you didn't hustle harder, but slowed down? What if you didn't self-optimize, but self-soothed? What if the answer wasn't more discipline, but more softness? Because maybe the reason you crash so hard isn't because you're weak, but because you've never been taught how to land safely. You fall into guilt, into panic, into shame. But what if you fell into a cushion instead? Into a protocol built for softness, into a week designed for repair? What would it feel like to honor your own descent as sacred instead of shameful? To say, this is my week of retreat. I will not overextend. I will not compare. I will not attack myself for feeling fragile. To treat yourself as someone worth protecting, especially from your own inner critic. That is cycle wisdom. That is hormonal maturity. That is emotional safety. And that is how you stop mistaking hormonal vulnerability for personal failure. Because there is no failure in feeling deeply, only messages you haven't learned to decode yet. And once you do, everything changes. You are not just feeling your own pain. You are feeling the echo of generations of women who were never allowed to pause. Women who bled in silence, who cupped through cramps, who smiled through breakdowns, who carried the weight and swallowed the scream. They didn't have the language to name what was happening inside them, so they called it crazy, or weak, or just being a woman. And that label stuck like a curse, cast down the bloodline. But here's the truth. You are not cursed. You are cyclical. And cycles are not a flaw. They are a design. Like seasons, like tides, like breath. So when you hate yourself for being too much one week and not enough the next, you're rejecting your nature. You're rejecting your own genius. Because it takes genius to shift and adapt and feel as deeply as you do. Your ability to feel is not your liability. It's your superpower. You read energy. You detect lies. You absorb tension and translate it into action. But no one taught you how to turn that power inward. So you used it to attack yourself instead, to dissect every flaw, to magnify every doubt, to weaponize your sensitivity against your own heart. And now, it's time to unlearn that. It's time to remember that the voice that tells you you're ugly is not yours. It's inherited. That the guilt you feel for resting was programmed. That the shame you carry about your emotions was modeled. And that your body has never been the enemy, only misunderstood. You were not born to be constant. You were born to evolve, to rise and fall with the same grace as the ocean, to be still without guilt, to roar without apology, to lose yourself, and then find her again. Not because you're unstable, but because you're alive, and aliveness is movement. So let it move. Let the sadness move through you, without shame. Let the doubt whisper, without obeying. Let the hormones shift, without questioning your worth. Because deep beneath the chaos, there is a knowing, a core, a center, a you that doesn't change with the tide. She is your anchor, your root, your witness, and she is still there. Even on the days you vanish, she holds the memory of who you are when the world forgets. And she's waiting, not for you to fix yourself, but to recognize her again. She is the one who sees the pattern, who names the shadow, who doesn't mistake a storm for identity. She is you, the whole you, the cyclical you, the sacred you. This isn't just a phase, it's a cycle, and cycles, when honored, become rituals. So, what if you built one? Not a routine, a ritual, a sacred sequence you return to every time the darkness comes. A softness for your hardest days, a map for when you forget the way, a love letter from your stable self to your hurting one. It could be simple, a calendar with colors, a playlist that grounds you, a note in your mirror that says, "This is not the end. This is the dip before the rise." Because you always rise, even when it takes longer, even when it's messy, even when you forget that you ever felt whole. The rise is coming. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to wait, with grace, with care, with compassion. That is the revolution. To sit in your shadow, and still speak kindly. To fall apart, and still know you're whole. To let the voice of self-hate pass through, without letting it unpack its bags. To say, you can sit here for a while, but you don't live here. This home belongs to love. That's the kind of woman you are becoming. Not someone who never breaks, but someone who breaks with awareness, with softness, with intention. You are cyclical. You are layered. You are storm and stillness in the same body, and nothing about that makes you broken. You don't need to be cured. You need to be seen, held, understood. This is your new inner architecture. This is how you build a self that can hold it all. The pain, the power, the phases, the rage, the tenderness, all of it. Because healing isn't about removing your lows. It's about recognizing that they don't define you. They are just weather. And you, my love, are the sky. Always there. Always vast. Always whole. Even when clouds cover you, you remain. Even when the storm roars, you hold. Even when you forget, you are remembered. So the next time you find yourself in the depths, ask not what's wrong with me, but what part of my cycle is this? And in that question, you'll find your power. Because power isn't control. Power is knowing who you are beneath the fluctuation. Knowing that no feeling is final. Knowing that the you who doubts herself is just passing through. She is not the narrator. She is not the truth. She is not the end. She is the signal that the real you is coming back, and she will. She always does. So hold on, hold yourself, and when you rise again, rise slowly, rise softly, rise without apology. You were never weak. You were cycling. You were never lost. You were transitioning. You were never broken. You were becoming. And now, you are here. Welcome back. We missed you. And the world is softer when you remember who you are. It's the end of the series, but only the beginning of your cycle wisdom.